What's up, Coach TJ?
What's going on? What's up?
Have you never been greeted before?
I have, but then I felt like I was about to say something I didn't want to say.
Yeah.
So
Greetings, fellow human.
That's a good greeting.
I am person.
I can't get into it now.
This is going really well.
I can't get into
stuff.
it now. It would just invite in too much scrutiny.
Yeah.
We can talk about it later over any
offline. Excellent.
Yeah.
We have a really fun podcast /YouTube however you're consuming this content well into the future. We're going to do our classic Hot or Not. Then we're going to do our partner race swap, where TJ and I coach each other up on our A races for this year. TJ is training for Western States, and I am training for the Leadville 100. Then we're going to talk about some essential tips for injury prevention before getting into what it takes to get ready for your first 100 miler.
Ooh, first 100 miler.
Do you remember your first time?
Yep.
Tell me about it. I was there, so you don't have to tell me.
There's a podcast.
Do you remember
on
it? Yeah.
I blacked out.
How much of it do you remember?
No, I remember it very clearly.
Too clearly?
I remember hallucinating.
What did you hallucinate?
A sunset that wasn't actually happening.
When did you hallucinate that?
Going up power line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the sun was just up?
Yeah.
I remember when I did Leadville, I thought Space Camp, which is like the illegal aid station that's like at mile about 86, which is like it's a renegade aid station where people come in, they're doing like bong rips, they're doing like tequila shots, they have glow sticks and rave music. When I ran Leadville, I thought I was hallucinating the aid station.
Oh.
And I told my pacer, I was like, dude, I think I'm really not okay because I'm hearing vuvuzelas. And my pacer was like, nope, those are real.
Those are real?
Those are real vuvuzelas.
Well, the sunset was not real. It was several hours too early.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really weird.
Nice.
Yeah.
You know things are going well when you start to see things.
I think, when you haven't been taking in enough calories, weird stuff starts to happen.
Yeah. When I did run, it's not a hallucination so much as like radical self-belief and poor distance perception, but I remember I was going up the last like really big climb of Run Rabbit from like the 70-mile aid station up to the Continental Divide. I remember seeing a really bright light on the horizon. I was like, okay, that's Billy's rabbit hole. I got to get to Billy's rabbit hole.
Go towards the light.
I'm like climbing towards the light. I'm like, fuck, this thing is not getting any closer. And suddenly I'm at Billy's rabbit hole and I look up and it turns out I had been like gunning for Saturn like all night. But like the whole time I was like, you got it, Zoe. You're so close. That light is definitely getting closer.
Wow.
And spoiler alert, it was not. But that is what positive self-talk can do for you.
And you know what? That makes all the difference.
It does, because when I got to Billy's rabbit hole, I felt great, and I was really pleased that I did not have to continue ascending straight into outer space.
Wow. Gosh.
It's all relative.
It is. It really is. Wow. Wow. That's all I have to say.
I don't know if that's a hallucination so much as just a delusion of grandeur, but
that you
it worked
could reach
for me.
Saturn.
That I could literally run to Saturn.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
special.
I mean, I'd like to have a little of that confidence.
Yeah.
Going into Western States.
Like, I'm going to be the first runner to literally run to outer space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I have no idea what's going to happen out there. It's going to be hot.
It's going to be hot.
Anything could happen.
That's true.
I could end up on, what's the hottest planet that there is? The sun.
The
other
sun?
than the sun.
What, yeah, star.
It's not a planet.
Mercury.
Mercury?
Which is like right next to the sun.
Yeah. That's what it's going to feel like, running on the face of the sun.
Yeah. Which is an amazing idea for someone of your complexion.
Well, when you're this
I love that
pale,
for you. You're just going to become a freckle.
I think you just, maybe you don't absorb as much sunlight or something.
You reflect it. You're like a white.
Yeah. It's better for, maybe less efficient for evaporative cooling, actually.
A tan?
Yeah, a tan might be more efficient because maybe you're absorbing more.
It's true.
Heat. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm absorbing more Lukes.
I'm not a dermatologist.
So, speaking of heat, we have some fun hot or nots right off the bat. This one came to us courtesy of Coach Matt. Shout out to Coach Matt.
Coach Matt.
UFO's recovery sandals. They're like epic flip-flops with like a super bouncy rubber. Do you have a pair of UFOs?
No.
I think I have like 3 pairs of UFOs.
You have a lot of recovery
I
sandals.
have a lot of recovery sandals.
You've got problems.
Am I addicted to recovery? The thing that's ironic is that I am shitty at recovery, but I have all the footwear for it.
It's true. It's true. I don't think I've ever seen you wear your UFOs.
I wear them. I don't like to. Okay, and we'll get into this in the hot or not. Or I guess this can just be my take. Well, from a scientific standpoint, there's like no evidence that says that UFOs or any recovery shoe is like more beneficial than not. Usually in a recovery sandal, what you're going to see is like something you can wear with a sock. So, hey, sexy. And something with a little bit of arch support and a little bit breathable and light and soft. Again, it's more just for vibes than it is for actual recovery. It is a pretty good idea after a long run to get out of your shoes, let your feet breathe. But wearing an epic rubber sandal is not actually going to help you recover. And, you know, maybe you can save that money or even invest, like whatever footwear you wear to recover, boom, that's recovery footwear. But I think the idea is to support the arch and to just give you something comfortable that also sort of lets your toes spread out and breathe.
Keep those feet happy.
Keep those feet happy.
Happy feet, happy runner.
Yeah, whatever works for you and your feet is great. You don't need to shell out mad cash for expensive shoes. Birkenstocks work just like you love your like $20 EVA like Amazon Birkenstocks.
They're 40 to 45, I think.
Big spender.
A regular pair of Birks will run you at about $100 at this point, I think. Maybe like even more.
That's one of the few products that I will always endorse, though. I love a Birkenstock.
I'm up for a new pair.
Yeah, I really like the furry Birkenstocks. But you can only get so much wear out of them if you have sweaty feet.
Yeah, that's my indoor shoe of choice in winter.
Yeah,
indoor recovery shoe
you have
of choice.
the furry sandal ones.
Yeah, I do.
You walk around the house looking like the blonde Big Lebowski.
I look good in those.
It's a good look.
They're nice.
And I know we've talked about this on the podcast before, but when you're out in the wild, you wear calf-length socks, high crew socks, with sandals.
Yeah, absolutely.
And jorts.
Happy feet, happy runner. I rest my case.
It's amazing.
And if it wasn't UFOs on here, it would be Birkenstocks, which are clearly hot.
Yes. Yeah. Again, like there's no like real performance benefit to shelling out for expensive recovery footwear. If you like it, great.
Yeah. If it feels good to you, it works.
If it feels good to you, I think the key is just to take your running shoes off after you're done running.
What about KT tape? Is that hot? Or
yeah?
Not?
Yeah. I'm going to say, well, I think in certain contexts it can be hot.
Okay.
If you're using KT tape to like hold yourself together instead of working on strengthening and working with a PT, that's not ideal. If you feel that you chronically use KT tape, it might be good to investigate instead of just treating the symptoms, to investigate and remediate the underlying cause of whatever you're taping. That being said, like when I've had lower leg or like Achilles issues in the past, I've really found that using like any sort of rock tape, KT tape, doesn't matter what the brand is, any sort of kinesio tape to tape my Achilles is super duper helpful. And I also tape like my collarbones for longer races so I don't get chafing on them. Are you a KT tapette?
No, I am not. I
just
think
like
when
never
I
have,
first started
not into
trail
it.
running back in the 12 years ago, maybe at this point, I used to run in those original OG Killian shoes, and they gave me some Achilles issues.
Yeah.
I think there was a period where I did use KT tape on one of my Achilles, and it really made a huge difference.
Yeah.
But it's so long ago that it's hard for me to remember. And I think after 2 or 3 years of trying to be a Killian, I realized that these shoes are really only meant for one man.
Yeah.
And I promptly switched over to another pair of shoes that gave me major issues. So
nice. All right. KT tape. Hot
KT
if
tape.
you use it correctly and not instead of proper PT. Which I feel like is sort of the like answer to all of our questions.
Yeah, I did have my PT one time recommend KT taping.
Do you tape your nipples?
Something. No.
Do your nipples chafe?
Oh yeah.
You just let them.
Usually
just let them go.
In the winter. I just use Body Glide. Isn't that what people do?
Some people tape them. Some people lube them. I don't know. I don't think women deal with this in the same way. It's never happened to me.
Well, you don't have material that goes up and down, you have a sports bra on,
right?
And that's not moving around on top.
Not
of your
a ton.
nipples.
Although I'm not filling it out a ton either. So I've actually like the biggest.
It's the
change.
issue is with the shirt. If
Yeah.
it's wet, I think the movement of it is what causes the chafing. You know. So,
okay, gotcha.
you know, maybe I do know athletes who actually wear like a skin tight, like next to skin layer, underneath their actual like running
like
shirt,
a base layer.
Kind of like
that's
a
lot of
cyclist.
torso fabric.
It's, you know, if you're a sweatier man, that's a lot of extra fabric.
It's a lot of fabric.
It's a little too much coverage, insulation.
Yeah.
But hey, you know, whatever works for you.
Makes my nipples feel hot just thinking about it, and not in a cool, not in a fun way.
We have to put some kind of user discretion advised on this
not for
conversation.
kids.
Let's move on to perfect 180 cadence.
Do you have perfect 180 cadence?
No, my cadence is usually higher than 180.
Really?
Actually.
Oh, you do have little hamster feet.
Well, I'm only 4 feet tall, so
He's a short king, and short kings can have higher cadence.
typically, like in workouts, my cadence is well.
What are we
over
pushing, like 190?
Yeah,
200?
Yeah. No,
Wow.
200. I don't know.
Like a little, like a dachshund.
Like an overstrider, probably on a lot of workouts.
120
plantar issues. 120, 200, 210, yeah, 220 even.
So this is something that I hear about a lot from athletes because it's really gotten popularized on the internet and particularly places like Reddit and TikTok and just all of the weird corners of the internet.
Born to run.
But people say, born to run. People say you have to have perfect 180 beats per minute cadence, and which means that your feet strike the ground 180 times each minute. That's not true. It is sort of like an idealized average, but your cadence is going to vary wildly depending on the terrain, your age, the speed that you're going at, your leg length, and a lot of different things. So what I always tell athletes is, like, we want to be aware of your cadence. You do want to think about minimizing ground contact time. You want to make sure you're not overstriding, right? So, like, sometimes focusing on having really light, quick strides, really focusing on that pull through, really focusing on, maybe trying to up that cadence a little bit can be beneficial, but we never want to obsess about a perfect number. This perfect 180 number is actually extrapolated from a study that was taken out of context, again, looking at averages. And, you're a short king. You don't want to be looking at the averages of someone who's like maybe 6 inches or a foot taller than you. In the same way, like, our cadences will be really different. If you're doing a workout, your cadence is going to be higher when you're going faster. So I just never want athletes to get obsessed with the number or really worry about their cadence. I do want athletes, again, to, like, as you think about increasing your speed and increasing your biomechanical efficiency, you do want to move that number up, but we don't want to obsess about it. I think the big key here is, like, you don't want to feel like you're plodding, and you don't want to feel like you're dragging your whole foot on the ground and really moving slowly. But often when you work on your speed and you work on your form, good cadence will follow. And focusing on the number isn't just going to magically change your form, and it's not just going to magically make you fitter and faster either.
Yeah, I'm not hot on this. I think it just makes athletes fixate on the wrong things.
Right. And again, like, I'm always skeptical of, like, how are you measuring it? How accurate is it? So I'm not a fan.
Can you count?
Yeah. Dude, I cannot count when I run.
It's kind of annoying to try to count your cadence.
No, I fully can't do it. I have no idea what my cadence is.
Oh, don't you look at Strava? It's so accurate. It tells me my accurate cadence.
I just check in with Strava once a day, every day, so it can give me an accurate measurement of my self-worth, and then I tune out.
Talking about self-worth. Tour de Jance. Hot or not.
If you love attaching your self-worth to a random number, boy, do we have the race for you.
Oh, yeah.
You have not done this race.
Hell no.
So, Tour de Jance.
I have trained people
TDG,
for it.
Me too. Yeah. It's a tough one. I'm just like, get excited about hiking.
I
and
love
running.
to hike for days and days.
For days in the
Very
wilderness of Switzerland.
It's beautiful.
So this is a huge European race. It's 200. Do you know how many? I can't remember how many miles it is exactly.
It's a 200-mile race.
It's like over 200 miles, and it's incredibly steep. In like sort of in the Mont Blanc area around Switzerland. Huge race, big deal over in Europe. We've had a friend do this. This is something that I'm like, if this flips your skirt, I empower you to do it, if it's your thing. I wouldn't necessarily say training athletes for 200-mile races is my favorite thing ever, given the choice. and especially this one because it is so steep, it is so extreme. It is très European.
You know, what I would love to do is do Tour de Jance over maybe a 14-day period.
Yeah.
Where I can do about 15 to 20 miles a day.
Yeah.
And just eat baguettes and go to, like, French refugios where you just, like,
eat pizza,
hang out.
sleep in a bed.
Yeah.
Don't hallucinate.
Make it a vacation.
Yeah. You know, so one of
soft Tour de Jance.
One of my good friends who's a writer, Doug Mayer, has written really beautifully about TDG, and he wrote a piece called Touching the Dragon. Because so many people end up doing this race and they feel like they walk away like mentally and psychologically changed. Like they actually liken it. There have actually been studies that show that it can change people's brains in the same way as like a mega dose of psilocybin.
I think the dragon refers to opium. Am I wrong about that?
I don't know.
Sounds like a lot of drugs.
But people TDG is a very trippy experience for many people. So I do see the appeal. But you can do psilocybin on the couch now here in Colorado.
Can we?
Yeah.
Oh.
It's decriminalized.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, and being legalized in research.
So I don't have to go to Tour de Jance.
You don't have to go do TDG.
To feel that.
To rewire your neural pathways.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's a biohack.
Yeah.
Wow.
You heard it here first.
Wow, that's going to be
Don't
all
run
over
and
Instagram.
do drugs. I hope that's the clip that gets pulled for social media. So, you know, if you're into this, great. If you're not, also great. If that's your goal race, more power to you. Maybe not my favorite thing to train folks for, though. Just because it's, like, so big. And the amount of time that athletes are able and willing to commit to it varies wildly.
I agree with that. I've seen a lot of, how do I put
The
this?
couch to TDG athlete?
I have not.
But
I've seen people with some wildly inflated sense of expectations of what they can do.
You know, not a good first race, I'll say that. Do a few others. Get a few others under your belt.
Thankfully, the athletes that I've trained for this have been really experienced in the longer stuff, and they did quite well at Tour.
Yeah.
So, they did great. Super psyched for them. It was a fun experience to train people for this. It's very different from what we normally work on.
Yeah. Okay, well, speaking of racing, you are just about to start the taper for Western States. We're 3 weeks out?
3 weeks out.
Holy smokes.
Oh my God.
So you just recently shared your race plan with me. So sort of your plan for timing and what you're going to want to pick up at aid stations and sort of projecting your expectations for the race. I would love for you to share with me how you developed that plan for yourself.
So I ran Tour de Jance and I had a euphoric experience. And so,
you can do that. I'll be doing Tour de Couch.
Yeah. I mean,
Tour de Fromage.
Honestly, I'm just, I really wish I was tapering now. I felt it like I had another big weekend. And oh my God, I can't believe the time has gone so quickly.
Yeah, we're here.
3 weeks away.
Can you believe it?
I'm finally off the wait list, which happened last week or the week before.
You're officially in.
Yeah, so that's good. Because there was a minute there where I was like, all right, no movement happening here. I'm training really, really hard. I'm very tired.
Yeah.
There's no movement happening here. All right, what's plan B? You know, where are we going to go race if this doesn't happen?
Yeah.
Because you just never know. I mean, people are we talk about injury prevention and stuff in this later on in this call. And people
if you're ahead of me in the wait list for Western States, feel free to not be diligent about your injury prevention.
Well, people are getting smarter. A lot more people are working with coaches. You know, the training has evolved a lot. And I wouldn't be surprised if, like, the whole wait list doesn't get taken this year.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're freaking running Western and you don't have a coach, what are you doing? I mean, honestly.
I have questions for you.
What are you doing? What are you thinking? You're clearly not thinking.
Yeah.
Get a coach. I mean, like, my God, you get a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to race.
And you're just going to free ball it.
Yeah, not a chance,
No.
at least for me. You know, maybe that's too much of a hot take for some folks, but, you know, maybe that'll get them to think about it.
I would be really curious who is 19 minutes and 48 seconds into a coaching podcast and is like, I don't know, not loving this coaching thing.
Yeah, well, you know.
I disagree.
How do you get information?
I just love getting advice from these people for free.
Well, people do like that.
That's
there
true.
are,
and we love you. Thanks for listening and supporting. But I'll tell you, this information goes a whole heck of a lot further when you have accountability and systematization.
I know. Did we
when
add
it's systemized?
Did we add accountability to the list of injury prevention things that we have going on? Because that's probably pretty helpful.
Anyway, so you you really put pen to paper. You made a spreadsheet walking me through your race plan. How do you start to game out how long things are going to take you?
Honestly, for this particular race, I did all of my planning based on looking at other athletes that I think are of similar level to me and what their performances and splits have been in the past. This race is different than any race that I've done before, as it's a net downhill race. Over 22,000 feet of downhill with 17,000 feet of climbing. I've never done a race like this before, and like on paper, that looks like it really plays to my strengths. I'm a very strong and resilient downhill runner, and I've had very good race results, primarily based on my downhill running ability, and kind of getting by on the up. But I think, it's just hard to say because it is 100 miles, 3 kind of really different, distinct parts of the race course, one being an alpine, one being in these canyon section, another being on like pretty posh runnable trail. So I don't know, like I believe to be, I believe I'm capable of running somewhere around 16 hours and 30 minutes. That was actually the time goal.
Calling your shot, Babe Ruth.
That was actually the goal that I had for Leadville as well.
That's awesome for me. Like, I'll be in bed, I'll get a full night of sleep. I can like straight up watch Oppenheimer after we finish.
Yeah, well, you saw it
on a good day, right?
You saw at Leadville how that we were on track for that until about mile 82.
Until you and I got to spend 6 hours of high quality time together on the trail
hiking.
So you jogged, twice.
Little. I jogged as much as I could without throwing up everywhere.
Yeah. I jest. You did great.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And I'm excited to pace you the last 6 miles of Western
a lot
States.
can happen, but if you set a low outcome for yourself, you're going to get likely a lower outcome.
Yeah.
So honestly, I'm almost thinking about retinkering it to a sub 16 hour race plan because I think that I'm definitely capable of running 16:30. I feel really, really fit. I haven't, all of my runs have gone primarily really well. I've been training for this since basically 2 weeks after Leadville. I mean, I literally took a week off for that, a week of easy running, and immediately started training. I did not know I was in the race, but I did.
But we're all always, like, a big part of my philosophy is that we're all always training for
I've probably run
States.
2,500 training miles.
Yeah.
Between that race and this race, so it's just I think that this race plays to my skill set. I'm gonna go for it. I love it. Clear like.
Fuck yeah.
At least the preliminary plan that I've put in place reflects what I've seen some other athletes who I've raced against before, who I think we have fairly similar fitness levels. Perhaps maybe I'm reaching a little bit because they've run Western States before, and that's always a thing. And also, I always reserve the right to add an hour to that if it's going to be 100
the margin
plus
for
degrees,
error is
Well, it's different. Like if it's going to be a race where it's 75, 80 degrees, or if it's going to be a race like last year, or if it's going to be
in the 60s,
or what? Right, or if it's going to be a race where it's 100, 110.
Those are very different days.
It's just going to be a lot different, and I think having that flexibility, but the standards remain the same. The goal is to be on my growth edge the entire time. Not a step should feel comfortable from start to finish. All of that kind of like attitude and way of being, I think for me is like the most important thing to have rather than the numbers, because like the crew can adapt to however I'm doing on the course. And of course I can too. So, yes, it's great to have like a plan in place. Sure, we have our crew teams dialed and the jobs that they're going to do dialed. And I love that I've already done that 3 weeks before the race, because now like I'm going to probably going to be able to properly get a really good rest in before the race. And I feel like I really need it. I've been really pushing hard in work, life, extracurriculars, and training, and it feels like a lot. I was definitely feeling that after my run this morning, where I was like, oh dear God, like 6 hours of sleep last night was
insufficient
enough. Yeah, like ouch. But I'm excited to just like go for it.
Yeah.
Knowing like what's the worst that can happen. I have to walk it in like I did at Leadville. Like I can
You DNF at Green Gate and you end up crying into a bowl of tater tots and then having to beg a stranger to drive a Subaru down to the aid station to get you out of there because you're no longer able to walk.
I mean, maybe I'll be eating my words, but I feel really good about my durability.
Yeah.
That, like, I feel like that I can get the job done in the amount of time that they're going to give me if I blow up.
Yeah.
And I think I'm too smart to blow up. So
yeah.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
See if it's a 110-degree day.
How do you advise athletes make their own race plan?
Yeah, I mean, I would think about using your long runs as a great gauge, especially in the longer races where, your long run is much more similarly like correlated to how you're going to be running at the actual race. Like 100 miles, you're going to be running very easy, most people. So, long runs, they're going to be done very easy. So great indication there of what you're capable of. I'm using a little of that to like tinker down and get more specific with my actual planning, because I'm trying to mimic in like especially last weekend and then this coming weekend, really the last chance to mimic like the climbing and descending in the canyons, which I have kind of targeted as the crux of the race. Will probably be like that 30-ish, 26, 30-mile section. And, the times that I'm doing in my training while fatigued, while at elevation, I look at that and then I try to translate that to those sections of the course.
Yeah.
Okay, how will you be doing here? Yeah, it's going to be a race experience. You're going to be moving faster, lower elevation, taper. What about the heat? And you try to make the best estimate that you can. And I think it's just always good to have a crew that knows, like, you're giving your best estimate, and like everybody needs to remain flexible.
Right. And everyone on the crew is in love with an ultra runner, so they get it. And everyone, like, it's no one's first rodeo.
Well, not at Western States, but at Leadville, it could be everybody's first rodeo.
Well, I mean, like for the crew, like for people who are along for the journey with you.
I have to say, Zoe, I think at Leadville, everyone could be brand new, like the crew. Like,
I mean, for you personally, or
no? I think for everybody.
Yeah.
Like
I thought you meant for you.
No,
specifically.
Not for me, but for like the average athlete. Like at Western States, you have to.
Oh yeah, dude! Like, there's
experience.
So many people at Leadville who are like, "This is my first trail." Don't. We'll get into this later. Spoiler alert! Don't do that. That would be my coaching take. Is that's a poor first race to do. People do it. I would not.
Hey, people DNF all the time.
That's an expensive, shitty vacation.
Yeah. But also, I've had success with athletes who, did their first 100 at Leadville.
I mean, first 100, fine. But first race, I'm a no to that.
I don't know if I've had a first ever one and done only.
That's definitely
ever.
A thing.
I think I had one guy last year.
I met a guy at Run Rabbit. Like that.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So, what are you doing to prepare for Leadville right now? Are you 3 months away from the race?
So it's August 17th, so we're like
2 months.
Yeah, 2 months. So
now
we're getting there.
You're
Starting to like really.
You're in it now.
I'm in it. So I raced and essentially trained through a 50K, which felt great. I recovered really well. I've been incorporating some very easy cycling into more for like funsies and recovery than like as a training stimulus. Like active recovery. Mm-hmm. I know that sitting on a bike is different than sitting on the couch.
Yeah, I really don't like that for runners. So if you want me to coach you up on this, it's not going to feel good. And for any cyclists out there, rest. Just straight rest, people.
I actually think after my race, biking really helped move my legs around. I'm pro easy cycling in certain instances, but not for everyone.
I just feel like you've got to be so clear about what it's for that not to just be the manifestation of exercise dependence.
I mean, for me, it was like I actually noticed my legs physically felt better when I did it. So that's why I did it. I would have been fine not doing it. You know, it was more like I had run out of movies to watch and it was nice outside. So I did a little bike, and if it hadn't felt good, I would have not done it, but it felt good. So I did it. And then I ate a lot and recovered and sat. So, and also I talked about it with my coach, and he said, I am perfect and enough, and endorsed it. So.
You're enough. You can make the wrong decision. You're enough. You can make the right decision. You're enough.
Correct.
I love that, because that's true.
I don't want accountability. I want validation, TJ.
We're getting to the heart of things here.
Enough about biking. I am going to Leadville this week to do some boot camp.
Are you going to run on the course? What is
I'm going to run on
snow
the
out
course.
there? What's it
There
look like?
definitely seems like there's snow on the course.
I think you should do power line. That probably won't have snow.
Power line is tough because it's on private land, so I don't know how much I'm going to be able to get to that.
How is that on private land?
It's on because it's owned by someone.
Can't you just run from the trail onto that and just be on
Yeah,
it?
but you're on private land.
I didn't see any private property signs.
There are many private property. They actually, for the race day, I mean, you might have been tripping balls and you don't remember. There's little like trifold posters that have a QR code that you're supposed to scan to sign a waiver to say like if I to do the like Pacers have to sign it, you had to sign it to do the race. So
Interesting.
you signed a form saying I acknowledge that part of this race is on private land.
And with so many other good trail choices around,
Yeah.
why are we going out of our way to put this race on private land?
I have a lot of feedback for the Leadville course.
Yeah.
They're not trying that hard to make it cool.
Oh,
you know?
God, dude. I didn't realize that was on private land.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, there's so many other options.
Yeah. I have questions.
Man, so what are you going to do then?
I don't know that I need to necessarily do that specific. I've done it before. I've done it twice before. Didn't love it then. I feel more prepared now. But I would like to do Hope Pass. I would definitely like to run, I think the area around Winfield as well. I would like to do the Sugarloaf sort of stretch around before you get to
the
power line.
Yeah.
But I think for me it's mostly just going to be putting on some longer days at altitude and running, even if I'm not physically on the course, running terrain that's like pretty proximate to it.
Are you making any adjustments to your training volume because you're going to be sleeping and training at altitude for 4 or 5 days? It's going to be
I'm taking off work, so I am not like training. I'm also hanging out with some family there with my mom's coming out for her birthday. So we're going to do some fun girl stuff. We're going to go to the hot springs. We're going to hang out. We're going to watch movies. We're going to hike with the dog.
Nice.
So I won't be trying to like train super hard at 10K and then like be on client calls for 6 hours afterwards.
I think that's going to make
or
a
like
big
going
difference.
out and raving at night.
Yeah. Yeah,
I'm not going to be getting involved with the Leadville night scene as fun as that is.
I feel like if that's the one thing I can really point to in my own, Western States training, is that, setting aside those dedicated important blocks to do the training and really just focus on the training. You know, there's going to be 10 other months this year where I can do an extra athlete call or check more logs.
Like yard work, how important. I see a lot of athletes put a lot of training on the back burner for yard work.
As they should be,
the people in our neighborhood with the worst fucking yard, it's worth it.
You've got 10 other months. Everybody needs to lean into prioritizing what is most important at the right time. So, and unapologetically, without compromise. Like, I love that you're taking the time off. I think that that's going to help you really focus on what matters. That is the idealized way of doing a boot camp.
Yeah.
So yeah, go out there and run those big miles.
Yeah, I'm pumped. So I'll be spending I'll be spending like a week, and then I'm coming back to Carbondale for 2 days, and I'm going back out to Leadville, and then I'm racing the Leadville 50 miler as sort of my last little tune-up for the 100. So I'll be spending a good bit of time racing and training at altitude in the lead up.
I'm going to put you on the spot for a second here. Are you going to get a blood test before you start all this training at elevation?
Does our new health insurance cover vanity blood tests?
Likely, if you go through primary care, it might.
Okay.
I don't know for sure.
Yeah.
You'd have to look into that.
I would like to.
But our old health insurance didn't cover any of the testing that I've previously done.
I got all mine covered. Yeah, I tell my doctor that I'm a vegan menstruating athlete who lives at altitude, and she's like, girl, and I get free blood tests. Or it's totally covered by insurance.
Well, I paid a lot of money for a lot of blood tests.
Yeah.
And
you just need to tell people that you get a little fatigued after your period.
Well, if you're hoping for that, I doubt that that's covered by our new health care
providers.
Yeah,
they're like bargain basement.
You're going to need to get a thing from Kylie.
Yeah, I'll just have Kylie do a blood draw for me. And
she doesn't draw the blood, but she can create the order, and then you can go to Quest Lab and get it done.
I really have been working on supplementing my iron, and I would like to check to see how I'm doing with that.
Because there's almost no point in doing any training at elevation if your iron's not at the right level.
I mean, but I've been feeling like I don't generally... Last time I got my blood checked, my iron and ferritin levels were not optimal, but they're trending upwards historically.
That's good.
So they're the highest they've ever been.
Okay. Well, I'm just curious. I think it's also good for athletes who are listening. And
should I just call my mom and tell her not to come out to Colorado because my iron levels are off?
No, but if you want to actually reap the benefits of training at elevation, you have to be at a minimum standard for ferritin levels.
What do you know that number right off the top of your head for what you look for athletes to do altitude training?
It needs to be above 40 for men. I don't know what it is for women. That was why last year I changed up, because mine was 33 3 months before Leadville. And then after Leadville, it was 70.
Damn.
So because I made some big adjustments, but also we've talked a little bit about
there's more than one
GI
factor.
mapping and stuff going on to try to work on more nutrient absorption. But I did that test because it's just good to...
The iron test or
I did the iron test because it's just really important, I think, to make sure, if you're about to embark on some specific training, where are you at? Oh, do I need to incorporate another intervention in order to help set me up to train well?
Right.
And then particularly racing at elevation, you're not going to perform well if your iron levels are low. Right. So, to anyone out there who's listening, if you're an athlete who's training regularly, especially a runner, should be getting that blood tested a couple times a year.
Yeah, for sure. And as coaches, we're comfortable working with athletes, especially I think for female athletes, a lot of times what primary care providers will say is enough iron actually won't be optimized for performance or even for quality of life. So always advocate for yourself and always do research in addition to that.
Yeah. And I think that's just great to work with a dietitian. And obviously we're going to segue here into talking about some essential tips for injury prevention, and one of those is eating enough and making sure you're getting both macros and micros, the proper amount of nutrients in order to support the activity you're doing. This is fundamental at base building part of injury prevention. And the same thing is you can't really know if things are working. We have some indications, I feel good, I'm recovering, I'm sleeping well, those are indications that you're eating enough, not getting injured a lot, indications that you're eating enough.
Not getting sick a lot.
Not getting sick, right.
Bouncing back quickly after hard training sessions.
Yeah, there are some good indications of that, but also, athletes can get really used to training in a depleted state too, and some of these things can end up being accidentally normalized.
Yeah.
So it's always good to have, I think, ways to get that blood testing done, like a dietitian is a great way to get blood tests done, because they can order them right up for you and exactly what you want to look at specifically, which is what I do with Kylie. It's super helpful.
Shout out to Kylie at Fly Nutrition. She's the best in the business. So we really wanted to have like a two-part conversation, the first of which is essential tips for injury prevention, because it's really not really worth talking about how to train specifically for a 100 miler unless it's really built on a foundation of making sure that you are healthy, because good training, particularly high level training for a longer race, requires health and consistency, which really go hand in hand. So my first tip for injury prevention is run consistently. A lot of times I'll see injuries pop up when athletes want to take an off season, or, they go to the Bahamas for 2 weeks and so they don't run the whole time they're there, and they come back and they try to jump right into the exact same volume they were doing beforehand, and their tendons aren't ready, their soft tissue isn't ready, and you have to sort of ramp back up after time off. So one of the best ways to prevent injury is to run consistently and really try to avoid peaks and valleys in your training. You don't want to increase volume dramatically week to week, although the 10% rule in running, the rule that you shouldn't increase your weekly volume by more than 10% week to week, is actually a myth. Studies show that ramp rate is one of the biggest factors in determining a runner's injury risk, but more experienced runners can tolerate more than a 10% increase per week. For instance, frequently we'll go from 60 miles a week to 85 or 90.
I did a 33-mile week last 2 weeks ago, and then I did an 80-mile week.
Right. Yeah. And so as you get more advanced, and if you're healthy, you actually are able to tolerate more a pretty big shifts. And it's more about deviation from the baseline.
Right. Yeah, it's totally true. And I think, again, what also helps to support this is I love this idea of prehab rather than rehab.
Yes.
And so, I'm thinking about the proper strength in mobility, having intentional stuff that's done to prevent injury from occurring, learning where your weaknesses are, and then making sure that you're addressing them consistently. We have tons of athletes that are doing my PT, I'm doing my PT. And some athletes are doing that in response to an injury. And some athletes are doing that regularly because they've discovered through injury in the past an area of weakness that they need to work on.
Or imbalance.
Or an imbalance. And so they stick with that and they continue to increase and try to make gains there. That kind of prehab is really, really important. I like to see athletes who are healthy still doing PT.
Right. Yeah, and that's so true. And I'd love to know what your go-tos for strength and mobility are, but a big part of my routine is the 2-minute banded monster walk. So using a resistance band and doing lateral work, that's so helpful for stabilizing the hips, stabilizing the pelvis, and and that's a big thing that's been really helpful for, I have a tilty pelvis, and it's also really cured my IT band syndrome. So if your knees hurt while running, I really recommend doing the banded monster walks.
Mm-hmm. Monster walks are great.
What's an essential part of your prehab? You do a lot of eccentric heel drops.
I do a lot of eccentric heel drops, especially around this time of year when that vert is increasing a lot.
When that Achilles starts to shout.
No, I had Achilles issues coming off of Leadville. And so I started really to try to focus in on strengthening the soleus muscle in the calf, and also the Achilles, ankle mobility, just working on those areas to keep the lower legs healthy. That's a regular part of my routine. Obviously, monster walks I think are super, super helpful. I like clamshells too.
Love clamshells.
And do a ton
of glute bridges.
Glute bridges.
Love
I do
glute
those
bridges.
At least 3 or 4 times a week. Single leg, double leg, planks are huge too. I keep it pretty freaking simple because I think
and you do predominantly body weight.
Yeah, I don't do much weight. I do a lot with the band. I like side-lying hip extenders.
Yeah.
To kind of work on the glute med, and also kind of the insertion point where your IT band comes in to the glute, that's an area where I have noticed like some imbalance between the right and the left leg. So I'm consistently working on that stuff, you know, and it's not like I have an injury. This is just because I've had issues there before.
Right.
I figured out what I need to do to stay on top of it, and then I make sure that I get that stuff done.
Right. Like, everyone's biomechanics are really different. I have a leg length discrepancy and scoliosis because I have an extra rib on my left side. So, like, my skeleton just looks like a fucking Guillermo del Toro monster. Like, my x-rays are gnarly. It's a miracle I can run, truly. So being able to counter, again, the fact that, like, maybe on paper, not many of us are perfectly symmetrical. So you need to figure out where to work, ideally with a professional, a PT or a strength coach who can functionally, like, help diagnose and address where you might have imbalances or areas of weakness. But I think having a robust program that targets your specific issues is the best way to go with that.
Yeah.
And this next point is so important that I wrote it down twice.
Yeah, we already talked about this
and in
for a
all
second.
caps. But we're gonna say it again because it's the number one.
Yeah,
Gonna
it's
say
the
it?
number
Should we
one.
say it together?
No, you can take it.
Eat enough.
Yeah.
Eat enough.
Always.
Eat enough. That's just like whenever I see athletes stuck in cycles of injury, so many times it's because there's a challenge of low energy availability or maybe even a history of low energy availability. And, you have to eat enough to support your training. And I think this is particularly important for female identifying athletes. There's a lot of science that shows that even 200 to 300 within day calorie deficits dramatically increase your risk for bone and stress injuries. So that's like a Cliff Bar worth of calories that you skimp on after a run, just being a little bit in the hole because you went to your kid's soccer game after the long run and you didn't stop to get your protein shake or didn't stop to get your burger or whatever your refuel is. Doing that increases your risk of injury. You have to take that stuff so seriously. It is not worth it.
It's not worth it. I think it's better to err on the side of too much than to be on the side of not enough. It's just, I mean, God, there's so many reasons. When we talk about performance too, and so when we look at injury prevention, we know, like we literally know, if you're not eating enough, you're likely going to get injured.
Yeah, and I think people always want to find out if there's some secret way that you can lose weight while getting ready for a race and running healthy and injury-free, and that's just not a thing. You cannot adapt at the same rate while you're restricting calories. You cannot run healthy, you cannot prevent injury while running in a state of low energy availability. Them's the truth.
Yeah. How about sleeping enough?
Oh, sleep is huge, right? It's recovery, right? So you need fuel and you need adequate recovery, and sleeping and also stress management, making sure your stress bucket doesn't get overly full, is so important for preventing injury. So I think people always want to know, like, what can I do more of? Give me more to do. Put more on my plate to prevent injury. When in fact, oftentimes you need to do less to prevent injury. It's not about hammering some, like, super fancy strength and mobility routine. It's about making sure you get to bed on time. It's about making sure that you're taking care of your mental health, that you're meditating, that you're saying no to things that you need to say no to.
Well, I think we live in a culture of not enough, and as a result of that, we all think, to recover and to prevent injury, we should be doing more.
Right, like,
quite often,
I'll buy the squeezy pants, but I won't, eat enough, or I won't go to bed an hour earlier.
Right, I'll buy the squeezy pants, but, when I'm in my 8-week build for my 100-miler, I have to cut the grass, every Saturday. And it's just like, no, what you have to do is sit your ass on the couch and rest.
Yeah.
No, what you have to do is get to bed at 9 o'clock so you can get 8 hours of actual sleep. What you have to do is set 10 minutes aside for, deep breathing or meditation, so you can regulate your nervous system.
Yeah.
Most of us are not training in a vacuum.
Right.
So
are you who is training in a vacuum?
Professional, runners.
Yeah.
They, of course they do have life stress too, but often if running...
It's reduced as compared to think of the straight up, like, the nurses and the parents on our team.
Right.
That's a very different stress context.
I mean, totally. Like, if all you have to be aware of essentially is getting your training in, and whatever that is, and then the rest of
posting your shirtless reel.
You know, resting is training too. That's work.
It's when the adaptations happen.
Right. So, I don't want to trivialize professional athletics at all, but usually injury happens because of a confluence of overstress.
Yeah.
So, we're not taking into account how our life stress is impacting us, on top of not doing enough prehab, on top of not eating enough, or chronically being underslept, running too hard, not running easy enough, like all of these other things, and collectively they overstress your system. The stress that you're trying and hopefully is helping you grow is becoming unproductive, and it's breaking your system down, and eventually you get to a breaking point. Your body says this is enough. So we really do need to make sure that, like, when we look at this, we say, like, consistency, prehab, strength and mobility, eat enough, sleep enough, like, that it's not like, what do I need to add here?
Right.
Because, like, honestly, like, the culture says adding is good, adding is the right thing. But likely, if we really want to prevent injury, we probably need to take some things away.
Yeah.
Or look really mindfully at our kind of habits and routines and say, what is actually supporting? Are my actions in alignment with the outcomes I want to create? That's really important to think about. For example, next on this list is, to prevent injury, we have to run truly easy on our easy days.
A lot of times I'll see athletes get stuck in a cycle of running too hard, so they get injured, so they have to take time off, so they come back and they run too hard to compensate for all the time that they took off. And the best thing to do is to make sure that you're really intentional about the effort levels that you're accessing and training. Easy days should be easy so that we can actually zoom hard on our workout days and our hard days, but you can't run every day hard. That leads to, breakdown of both the soft tissue and bone tissue. Actually, after every run, you get micro tears in your tissue, and if you're running too hard, those tears are bigger and you don't give them time to recover. And your bones actually get like little micro fissures in them after runs, so that's why you really need to take that time and space after runs to allow those tissues to adapt. And if you're running at an inappropriate effort level, the impact is going to be higher, so the degradation of those tissues is going to be more.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, a good litmus test for whether you're ready to take on your first 100-miler or not is whether or not you can honestly look at consistency, prehab, strength, mobility, eating enough, sleeping enough, and being very good at running easy, while also knowing how to run with intensity at purposeful and important moments in your training. If you can knock all of those out and say, I am in full control of these, then you're ready to do the 100, to start training for the 100.
I think that's so true. So often I'll have athletes ask, am I ready? Like, how do I know when I'm ready to run a 100-miler? And I really think it's not like a certain level of like, it's not like you hit a certain time in training or in a race. It's really about like, are you chronically adapting to the training we're doing, and are you progressing?
Right. And
are you eating enough? Like, if you're someone who's stuck in cycles of injury or under recovery, I'm not going to recommend, you could be super fit, but I'm not going to recommend we go for a 100-miler, because it is a chronic and an acute stress that's not beneficial for every athlete. And I also think like mentally getting, and we'll talk about mental preparation for a 100 soon, but so often I'll see someone try to jump to the 100-mile distance before they're ready, or at a time in their life when it's maybe not a fit for their resources and bandwidth. And by the time that they finish the race, it doesn't even matter how it goes, but because they had to really overextend themselves to get to the start line, they'll have fallen out of love with running by the end. And that to me signals that it was an inappropriate goal at an inappropriate time.
Oh, it's just devastating as a coach to see that happen. And because
like the distance just isn't worth your love of running. It's a great distance if you love running. I love running and I love training, which is why I love hundreds.
Here's an idea that's not novel. You have more than one season to accomplish your first 100-miler.
It's okay to not do one ever.
Ever.
You don't need to do it.
Absolutely not.
You really don't. It's fine. Like, the majority of athletes we coach don't do this. And I also, one of the reasons we wanted to talk about this is because there are things that every athlete can learn from training for a 100. So this discussion is really not just intended for, the folks who want to do the triple digits. It's for everyone. And good 100-mile training, I think people are surprised. It really just doesn't look that much different from good training. Yeah. Yes, for higher level athletes, we're going to do some intentional boot camps. We're going to do some different things, but you should not feel, I never feel like training for a 100 radically upends or changes my life. I get a little more focused for some key times, but I'm not a different person.
Interesting.
I actually feel the most myself training for a 100. I feel focused. I feel intentional. I feel present. I definitely don't feel balanced necessarily, but not in a bad way.
It's hard to feel balanced when a lot of your daily habits, routines are pointing towards one specific goal, right? Like, I think if we are going to define balance, like it couldn't just necessarily be one focal point, one destination. Balance is kind of a spread of different things.
Correct.
So I think, it's interesting to think like, training for 100 isn't like that much different for most people. But if you are, taking on your first 100, likely you're going to do some training volume, some workouts. You're going to do some stuff that you actually haven't done before. Mm-hmm. So I think, for a very seasoned athlete like yourself, training isn't that much different. Perhaps you have some bigger back-to-backs at specific times. Perhaps your training is much more narrow and specific to certain terrain types or specific adaptations in the race. Like for Leadville, thinking about being able to do those really steep, long climbing and descending on Hope Pass and then still having turnover to run for 20 miles to power line.
Yeah.
That's very specific to that race. But, if you're a newer athlete, and we talked a little bit about this in a couple podcasts ago, but if you're a newer athlete, that training maybe even doesn't get that specific.
Yeah.
So, it totally depends on where you're at in the process. But there are, benchmarks, right? So, if I'm going to run 100, likely I'm going to do a 50K and a 50 mile on the lead up.
Yeah, I really, I don't think there's a test of you definitely have to run a 100K to do a 100 miler. But I do want to see, I don't think 100 miles is a great idea for someone's first race or even first ultra. I really think trying to be on the road of mastery towards the 50K and 50 mile distance and developing some amount of comfort at those distances will lead to better success. And I also think that teaches patience, which is an essential skill, and consistency, which is an essential skill to get ready for the 100 milers. That is not a distance that you should feel impatient getting towards. But again, I don't need people to try to just check the boxes of running a 50K or running a 50 miler. There are folks who will jump from the 50K to the 100 and do just fine. But for most people, spending more time at those shorter ultra distances is really, really beneficial if you are truly interested in succeeding at the 100-mile distance.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree.
I think something else that people sometimes can forget when training for a 100-miler is maintaining some amount of focus on speed. All of our athletes that we train for the 100-mile distance continue to do hill strides, continue to do flat strides, and continue to do speed work in the build-up to their 100s. We might, the workouts will likely look different because I tend to incorporate things like combo workouts, so doing hills and then tempo, or tempo then hills, or hills then speed, speed then hills, some combo of hills, tempo, speed. I like to mix and match, kind of going to a gas station, drink machine. Or fancy movie theaters where you can make Diet Ginger Coke. That's a tempo workout for me, is my Diet Ginger Coke, where I just become a mad scientist with workout composition. But we are really still working on improving speed and running economy while we're training for these longer distances. It's not just about endurance, and improving your speed can improve your endurance because improving your efficiency improves your endurance. So if you're not doing some amount of speed in the form of hill strides and flat strides, you're not correctly training for your 100-miler.
Yeah, I happen to agree with that, and I think that there is some information out there that would say, economy isn't that important for longer races on trail because foot strike variability, and it really comes down to just aerobic engine and how many training hours are you putting in. And I think that that there is validity to that. Like having a big engine, putting in that time aerobically is really important. I've had success training athletes who had to do, for hundreds, who had to do a lot of cross training. But I think likely those races are going to be longer as a result of not having that base of speed. And so like for getting ready for a 100-miler really requires race-specific workouts, especially for athletes who are looking to be competitive or get a very difficult 100-miler accomplished. There's going to be some specifics. And that is going to come at the cost of some ability to develop economy in a 2 or 3 month build out from a race.
Yeah.
But ideally, we talk about the fundamentals, and what you need is you already need a base of speed coming into this, and then you do hill strides or fast strides, or, you know, maybe at certain points of the build, you phase in, you know, a little 10K work to just keep the system topped off. But likely we're coming in with those adaptations already. And there are some people out there who say, oh, you don't need to maintain adaptations. I've heard that argument before. I just think it's total garbage. If you've ever actually trained for a steep 100-miler where you're spending a lot of time hiking, you feel so slow by the time, you know, you finish that race. And what helps is if you do focus on keeping some of those systems in check along the way. I think throwing those things out the window and saying it, you know, I've heard strong arguments out there on social media that you don't need to do maintenance. You don't need to, you know, focus on economy. I think that that's wrong. And I think that there's a lot of results.
You may not be prioritizing economy, but it is definitely still a critical part of the equation. What types of workouts do you have athletes do in the build up to their 100-mile races?
Either hill-specific workouts to improve uphill, the way that athletes are able to move uphill.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the basic stuff, like for a more beginner 100-miler, and then also tempo work and stuff like that. Practicing moving faster than we would actually move on race day, working on those systems that are a little more related to what you're going to actually use at the 100. But for more advanced athletes, I think, you know, this is really where specific training can start to shine.
Yeah.
Like a lot of my programming is going to focus on building durability, working to improve aerobic power under stress and fatigue. I think really targeting the stuff that matters in 100, where, you know, you're 80 miles into a race and you're tired and you still need to put out power.
Yeah.
You still need to be able to run. And it's very difficult in training to replicate that. I mean, you
can't. Like, you safely can't. And you shouldn't,
well,
right? Like, you don't need to run 100 miles in training to do a 100-mile race.
No, but I think we can simulate specific scenarios to
we
get
can
people
approximate
fatigued.
it, but it's not the same, right? Like, getting tired in a workout is different than how you feel at mile 90.
It's going to be different. I mean, especially for the nervous system, for sure. But if we don't try to approximate it in our workouts, then you're going to get to the race. It's going to feel so unfamiliar. You're just going to fall apart, and you're going to end up walking it in. And, you know, that's a big issue. I think as coaches, we have an obligation to continually get better at the workouts we prescribe to make them as more and more specific to the actual event as we can. You know, like, you have to still run on tired legs.
Yeah.
How do you mimic that? You know, you make someone tired and then you ask them to run faster than is comfortable.
Sure.
You know, and trying to find the right balance of that in training is integral.
Yeah.
It's absolutely integral. And any sport that has been successful, that has an endurance component, you can look at soccer, you can look at tennis, any of those sports, what has been integral to the professionalization and the success of those sports has been coaching practices shifting to meet the specific needs of those athletes.
Right.
So, you know, the 100-mile distance is just one of those things where, like, we the more advanced you are, the more specific we can try to get.
Totally. And I think one really big component of the 100-mile training is, of course, long runs, right? Like, I tend to prefer athletes have their longest runs be races. I think having facilitated efforts is a sort of higher quality experience, as you can get more out of it instead of carrying 50 miles worth of food. Having aid stations and competition is going to facilitate a much more productive and high quality day. Similarly with a 50K, a marathon, whatever it is for you. But I think sometimes folks will be surprised that you don't need to do a ton of excessively long runs in the build up for a 100-miler. I will, for my most advanced athletes, the longest solo run I'll have them do will be a 50K.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then some back-to-backs.
Yeah.
Like I'll, for an advanced athlete, maybe I'll have them do a 50K and then 10 to 15 miles the next day on tired legs. But you really, again, facilitating that, like, yep, you gotta bust those legs up and then continue to move. But you don't need to be doing 50Ks every weekend to get ready for a 100K. And oftentimes going past that, like, it depends by the athlete, so maybe I don't want to put a number to it, but long runs will have diminishing returns in terms of how productive they are and how the increased injury risk that comes with that much time on feet, and the fact that you are innately going into a calorie deficit during long runs because you cannot physically take in enough calories to 100% fill the hole that you've dug.
Well, it's such a delicate stress balancing act, which is just another, why would you do this without the help of a coach? I mean, it's just to get that right yourself, especially the first time you're doing 100. I mean, it'd be nothing short of a miracle, really, and most people get it wrong. But I think there are some some parameters we can put on this, some minimums that people need to hit. I think something that I've always kind of used as a general guide is 9 hours of training per week for 6 weeks, starting 9 weeks before the race.
Yeah.
For 100
as
is
a
kind
minimum.
of the minimum that people need to be able to be ready for. Like, if you can't do 9 hours a week for 6 weeks, that doesn't have to be 6 weeks in a row. But if you can't do 9 hours a week, likely you're probably not going to be ready for that 100.
Right before you defend your PhD, probably not a great time to sign up for a 100-mile race because it is a concerted time commitment. Again, like you don't have to live like a monk. You don't have to for most people, you don't need to radically change your life. You are going to have to be a little more intentional on the weekends. So, like, again, if your kid's in, like, the, regional soccer playoffs, that's going to require some negotiation and figuring out how to make it all fit, because you are going to need to spend some concerted time on feet doing some amount of volume. And again, trying to get that back-to-back volume. Ideally for, again, more intermediate advanced athletes, even doing a boot camp, maybe previewing the course. But it is a different training stimulus. And another thing that's so important before a 100-mile race is really dialing in that fueling and being able to practice it. And that's been a huge part of your preparation for Western states is, you even started this winter trialing Pop-Tarts on the treadmill, expanding your palate, building in more food sources so that you can continue to fuel well into the later stages of a 100. And I think that if an athlete cannot comfortably, productively take in about 300 calories an hour at shorter races, then 100 is going to be a really tough proposition. I really think making sure you meet your baseline fueling needs and your GI system is trending in a good direction is really essential before trying to step up in distance. If you can't fuel well, you can't race well.
Right. Like, and I agree. I mean, it's always a bit of a coin toss when, like, an athlete is starting, like, that 3-month training phase for 100 and they're figuring out what their fueling is. And it's, it does really make a difference having done that work before that and putting in those building blocks before. That way it raises the quality of all of that higher volume training that you're going to be doing, the race specific workouts, the boot camps, all of that jazzy stuff that's cool about the 100-mile training. If you're also trying to figure out your fueling during that, it's challenging. I think in the same vein, mental preparation is something that's important.
What do you work with athletes on in terms of mental preparation going into 100-mile races?
Yeah, well, first of all, again, this starts before the build for the 100 with athletes that I coach, because, when you're starting to build for 100, you don't want to be, like, at the very beginnings of figuring out, your mental strategies. Yeah. You want to have had established these things, because the training for 100 is going to get stressful. You're going to put yourself in challenging positions. And so if we don't have the basic of those tools already established, we're not going to get the quality out of those sessions. In fact, like, it can be harder to tolerate those sessions. So, there's certain things that I work with athletes on, very easy tools, honestly, segmenting, breaking bigger long runs down into smaller pieces.
Yeah.
And
going aid station to aid station, climb to climb, crew point to crew point, thinking of how to not think of the goal as one big block, but chunking it up so that you can really conceptualize and systematize getting from point A to point B in smaller segments.
And I think that's the first part of that. And the second part of that is that you also combine specific self-talk for specific segments. Especially,
do you have some specific self-talk going into Western states?
I do. Mm-hmm. I do. And it's mainly centered around the heat.
Do you want to share it on the pod? Can you share your heat mantra?
My heat mantra is just like, I'm great in the heat.
Yeah.
My body is fully capable of handling these hot temperatures.
Are you good in the heat?
I'm great in the heat.
Are you capable of handling these hot temperatures?
Fully capable.
I love it.
So, like, it's really key to, and it's great to practice this before you get into the build. So long runs before the build for the 100, build-up races are a great opportunity to practice this, but trying to figure out, where do I think the cruxiest part of this race is going to be?
Yeah.
Let me have specific self-talk that I'm going to start initiating when I get into that part of the course. That way I don't have to wait for any of that negative self-talk, doubt, judgment, should statements to come in before I start using my self-talk. I want to start using it kind of like the prehab method. I want to use it before I have any challenges. So that's really key. Also, kind of in conjunction to this around self-talk is a strategy called labeling, which I think is really important, where we label.
What's labeling?
We label a thought as a thought and a feeling as a feeling. Those are the two primary things I have athletes
So, like,
target.
I'm tired. That's a feeling.
That's a thought.
That's a thought.
Yeah, my legs hurt.
It's a feeling?
Could be a feeling. Yeah. Could be a thought, too. But it just is an idea. It's just
to create separation between what you're feeling and how you respond to it.
That's exactly right. Because a thought is only dangerous when we
do something about it.
When we consider it a truth. When we say a thought is a truth, then it becomes dangerous. Then it can become part of a story that doesn't support an outcome that we want to create. Right. So if I say at Western States that I'm shit in the heat, I just suck in the heat.
Yeah.
And then it gets hot and I feel hot and my first thought is I suck in the heat, and I don't use a tool to stop the possible cycle of thoughts that could happen there, which is a cycle of unsupportive thoughts that don't support the outcome of finishing the race. A cycle of like runaway thoughts could be like, I suck in the heat, this heat is killing me, I am not going to finish this race. Like, this whole thing is just, this is a disaster.
It's fucked. I'm
fucked. I'm fucked.
We're
this
all
is
fucked.
Over. I'm just a piece of crap.
Fuck.
Like, I wasted 8 months training for this. Like, and it's like you go down
Gets
that
dark
hole
so fast.
Yeah. And so, like, the idea of labeling is just this great exercise of being like, when you're racing or training, and you practice this in training before racing, but I suck in the heat. Or, like, maybe the first thought for me would be like, it's hot.
Yeah.
That's just a thought. And then I immediately say, that's just a thought in my head. And then the follow-up would be the response to come in with the self-talk that I pre-prepared. I'm great in the heat. My body is capable of handling this stress. So labeling is a really, really important idea.
Yeah.
Like, that helps me restructure my thoughts in a way that supports the outcome I want, which is to finish the race. So we have labeling. We have segmenting. Those are great tools. I also think another good tool and a real big focus of my coaching is developing performance standards or a way of being for the race. So it's really focusing in on what are the things that I can actually control as an athlete. I can control my focus. I can control what I'm focused on. I can control my effort level.
Yeah.
I can control my attitude. I can control my intensity. I can control my thoughts, words, and actions.
Yeah.
So there's like 5, 6, 7 things that are fully in your control
Yeah.
during the race, no matter what people are doing, no matter what the weather's like, no matter anything else that's going on around you.
Yeah.
You are in control of those things. And so the idea is to figure out and hone in on how you want to be in challenging moments and use those standards as kind of a guide to get you through the challenging moments. So it's hot as hell. You know, like if that's the thought that comes up, you know, what's my attitude?
Yeah.
Oh, my attitude is like, I'm grateful for the heat.
Yeah.
You know, this is great.
Yeah,
I love it.
I love heat.
And I have a supportive thought. I love this.
Can I have another?
Yeah, sure. Whatever it is, you know, it's hot as hell. Check in with my effort level. How do I want to respond to that? I want to stay on my growth edge.
Yeah.
This should feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Does it feel uncomfortable? Good. You're getting it right.
Yeah.
Like, and just going through that list. Because when it's like going well out there and you're feeling the flow and you're listening to your tunes and whatever, like, you know, you're not really going to be checking in on like your standards. You're just going to be running the race. You're going to be eating your gels. You're going to be probably more process oriented. But when things get hard, it's who do you really want to be? Who do you need to be to support the outcome you want? So I work with my athletes to get very clear on that. That way they are in control of their destiny as much as they possibly can on race day.
Yeah, so to zoom it out, 100-mile training looks different for everyone. But there's not really a gold standard in terms of how long your longest long run needs to be. But doing a few intentional ultra races can be helpful. And maybe for more intermediate advanced athletes, doing a self-supported 50K, and for the most advanced athletes, doing a longer run the day after. Aerobic boot camp and base building weeks, ideal and preferred. But it can look different for everyone. However, the minimum required standard is about 9 hours a week of training.
For 6 weeks.
For 6 weeks.
Yep. That's a lot.
That's a lot of time.
Yep.
And if that number bums you out, that's okay, because there's tons of other great races you can do.
And you know what? Embrace it, because you can develop that
And it
experience.
should be fun. If it's not, it's not always going to be fast, fun, and easy. But if it's never fast, fun, and easy, then it can be worth having a conversation with yourself about what goal is going to be the most fulfilling for you and the most in alignment with your values.
Totally.
That's going to be different for everyone. And if you don't want to run 100 miles, I'm excited for you. I'm happy for you.
Awesome.
I wish I was like you.
Well, thanks for listening, guys. Hope you found this helpful.
And if you need a coach for your next 100 miler, you know where to find us.